Five Nights at Freddy's 4, the game so many of us on YouTube and other places have been waiting for. And I figured I'd take this time for me, someone who does not talk about these types of things very much at all, to give my 2 cents on what's been going on. I've seen a lot of people on YouTube, on streams, try to make up all this stuff about where these plot parts are supposed to be going. And a lot of times it's very, very healthy discussion. But this time I feel like I want to just step in and point out some things that make a lot more sense than what some people are trying to drum up. Now in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, we experience a game that takes place in a way different place, in a way different time, that feels way different than all the other ones, that encapsulates all the fear and horror tactics that we experienced in the previous games, but much more effectively, I think. But along with that has come plenty of more questions, because none of the questions we had before were ever answered. Who committed the bite of 87? What is Shadow Bonnie? Who is the purple Freddy that shows up in the minigames? All these questions and more have been left up in the air with no direction as to where we're supposed to go with them. A lot of other things, though, have been answered. And by a lot, I mean one. And that is where this takes place. A lot of people have been wondering, is this the bite of 87? In the Night 5 minigame, there is a scene in which it basically looks like the bite of 87. And from all the teasers and the hinted pictures that we get, all the fancy 87s in the code, people want to look at this and say, this must be 1987, must be the bite of 87, it's something, something, something 7, and I have to come down here right now, before too many other people say it, and say, sorry, it's not. Other people, a lot of the same people who for some reason think that any of the minigames outside of the Fredbear's Family Diner minigame take place in Fredbear's Family Diner and think, wow, this must be Fredbear's Family Diner. Look, Fredbear's right there. Sorry, no. Why this is? Well, it's relatively simple. This game cannot take place in 1987. The reason for that is, in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, all the springlock characters are already decommissioned. Now, I'm not trying to say that the location that you see in the minigames in Five Nights at Freddy's 4 are from Five Nights at Freddy's 2. That would be a huge stretch. I don't think that's the truth at all. What I do think is that this place is not the same facility as the one you play in Five Nights at Freddy's 1 or 2, which is something I'm sure people will try to figure out. This is not Fredbear's Family Diner, because Fredbear's Family Diner was the only place we've seen with one animatronic, and we aren't even sure if that's an actual animatronic or just a guy in a fluffy suit. What we can say about this place, though, based on the minigames, based on the characters that show up in the Child's Nightmare in this game, we can say with some kind of concrete fact that this is taking place in a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. This is not Fredbear's Family Diner. This is not Fazbear's Fright somehow. And I think that throws a lot of people off because they think, oh, it has to be one of these places. It has to explain the story. We're finally there. Really, they've explained story, but they didn't explain the parts you expected. Let's hope with the new DLC that they'll explain some more stuff. But let's get into some more of what they actually did explain, which is that we've already known about this place. We've heard about this place before. And I don't want people to be disappointed, but this is the justification for the majority of the story in the game. This is, to an extent, truly the final chapter, because we have some closure as to how these things were set into action. Let me lay this out for you. So, in the majority of the story for this series, it goes as thus. Fredbear's Family Diner is a diner, not a pizzeria, not some stage place, a diner with a gimmick that has one character in it known as what we can assume is Fredbear, right? And in this place, there is an event that occurs, or rather outside this place, in which a child gets killed by someone who we assume is the Purple Man, somebody who later on becomes more of a serial killer in the series. After this happens, this place, I don't know if they ever have any repercussions about that event or not, they go on to get bought out by Fazbear Entertainment. Now, Fazbear Entertainment, they create a franchise. They create multiple locations about this idea, about these characters that they want to have. Just the Chuck E. Cheese idea. There's never just one Chuck E. Cheese. And in this new franchise, this purple killer who has followed this business along from its start when it was just a simple diner, uses his methods, whatever they may be, to integrate, infiltrate, become a part of this business so that he can find more victims. However, he does not have an MO. I'm sure you've heard other people talk about this, maybe Matt Pat or somebody. Serial killers often have an MO, a method in which they operate, a way that they kill. And this purple guy, so far, has probably only had this one victim. So how is he supposed to get an opportunity? Well, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 gives him that opportunity. We don't notice, we don't pay attention to it, except for two things. One being that there is a minigame, probably night 3, in which while you're at the pizzeria, there is a Easter egg in which you can see the purple guy in between the doors, placing a springlock Bonnie costume on a person working there. Why is he there? Wearing that yellow marked badge of some sort on him? Doing something in this place? Probably because he is a part of more than one Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Maybe he's someone who's there to train people into wearing these costumes. These animatronic / costumes that can be walked around on their own without a person inside of them, but also be worn like a suit. Now, for someone to be able to train another person or help them get inside of it, that suggests that they know how to do it themselves. But it also means that they're not normally the person that does it. They're just someone who helps other people do so. This enters Five Nights at Freddy's 3 phone calls and the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 game as in the entirety. You play through this game as this child who does not like Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria at all. And in this, you eventually get placed into a very, very bad situation in which your older brother and his friends thrust you up into the mouth of an animatronic only known as Fredbear in the game, and they crunch down on your head and you're assumed to be dead, at least not very healthy. And after this, the screen fades to black and you get a star on your screen. But what this signifies is not the bite of 87. It isn't some weird thing that people might assume, but is something much more obvious, something that they've told us about already. If you listen back to the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 phone calls, phone guy suggests that something happened in a sister location, another Five Nights at Freddy's Pizzeria, in which a springlock suit had some sort of springlock failure that caused some sort of casualty. He never suggested that this was somebody wearing it. He never said this was a performer who was wearing this costume and then died because, oh, he breathed on the springlocks too much, which is possible, definitely. Perhaps this casualty was you, the character you play in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. And after this non-ghostly affected, non-serial killer affected, just accident happens due to these very, very haphazard, dangerous suits, a franchise-wide banning of these springlock costumes occurs that prevents them from being used in any facility, including the one that we play in the first and second games. Now, for anybody who wants to be a performer, this is probably a nail in the coffin, but for somebody who's trying to find a method of sneaking their way into some kid killings, this is probably their golden ticket. This purple guy who's probably working more than one role at this facility, the one that we play in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, but probably several years prior, decides, I'm going to go into that secret back room, that safe room, and grab one of those decommissioned costumes, one of those springlock animatronics, put it on, and use it to snatch these kids away and make sure they're never seen again. This leads into pretty much every other event that's happened in the main series, because I don't even know if I want to say this is a continuous, whole storyline from start to finish. That'll give you something to think about for a while. We have some answers. Now, let's think about the questions in which we haven't had any answers for at all.